April 17th, 2001. That was the day LaTanya Janelle Carwell, lovingly known as Janelle, came into the world in Palestine, Texas. From the moment she could walk, Janelle carried herself with the kind of grace and quiet strength that made you forget she was just a kid. She was the oldest child in the family, and she wore that role like armor. Protective, dependable, wise beyond her years. She wasn't just a big sister, she was the glue that held everything together. When the family later moved to Augusta, Georgia, Janelle's life seemed filled with promise. A gifted student with a natural talent for science and math, she dreamed of becoming a nurse, maybe even a doctor one day. Her ambition wasn't for status or praise, she simply wanted to help people. That's who she was. But what no one saw coming was that the very people she trusted the most would be the ones to betray her in the most unimaginable way. It started slowly, subtle changes in the home, shifts in routine, the quiet pressure of growing responsibilities. Especially after her mother, Tanya, claimed to be battling cancer. Janelle didn't complain, she stepped up. She took care of her siblings, ran errands, cooked meals, and supported her mother every step of the way. But something was off, especially when a new man entered the picture, a man who would change the course of Janelle's life forever. On her 16th birthday, Janelle vanished. One moment she was there full of dreams and potential, and the next she was gone. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. And what followed was a tangled web of deception, manipulation, and dark secrets buried within her own family. You're watching True Crimes by Dominic, and today we're diving deep into the devastating story of Janelle Carwell, a girl who gave everything to those she loved, only to be betrayed in the most brutal, heartbreaking way. Make sure to subscribe, because new stories like this drop every 2 days, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Hit like if you believe stories like Janelle's deserve to be heard. Let's get into it. Tanya Faye Tripp met Leon Tripp in one of the most unlikely places while he was behind bars. Leon wasn't serving time for a petty offense. He was locked up for assault and battery, and that was just the tip of a violent history that stretched back years. Since June 2009, Leon had been sitting in a prison cell, convicted of multiple felonies, aggravated assault, aggravated stalking, and a disturbing pattern of violence, especially toward women. One of his most serious offenses involved his ex-wife. But despite this deeply troubling record, Tanya struck up a romantic relationship with him through letters exchanged behind prison walls. To outsiders, it didn't make much sense. But for Tanya, it seemed to be love, or perhaps something more complicated. The pair kept in constant contact, and soon they were a couple. By 2015, shortly after Leon's release, Tanya married him. At first, Leon came across as a reformed man, a doting husband, a father figure trying to bond with Janelle. But it wasn't long before the cracks began to show. Behind his carefully constructed image was the same man with a violent past, one who had no intention of changing. People who knew Tanya described her as a caring mother, especially before Leon entered her life. But something shifted after the marriage. Friends and family began to notice her growing dependency on Leon, a dependency that seemed to cloud her judgment, even when it came to protecting her own daughter. Arguments in the household became more frequent. Janelle, once the center of Tanya's world, began to feel pushed aside. Anytime there was a dispute, especially ones involving Leon, Tanya almost always took his side. It was as if her loyalty had been quietly transferred from her child to this man she barely knew outside of prison walls. As time passed, Leon's control grew more suffocating. He didn't just want Tanya's love, he wanted full control. He isolated her from family and friends. And slowly he began to manipulate nearly every corner of Tanya's life. Tragically, Janelle was caught in the crossfire. Those around Janelle began to notice the change. Teachers saw it first. The once focused and eager students started slipping. She'd show up late to homeroom, seemed distant during class, and her homework stopped coming in altogether. Friends also picked up on the red flags. Janelle, who once had a vibrant social life and loved being around others, began pulling away. When asked about what was going on at home, she stayed tight-lipped. She never said anything alarming, but her silence spoke volumes. It was like she was trying to keep something hidden, Something too big or too dangerous to say out loud. Then came April 18th, 2017, the day after her 16th birthday. A day that should have been filled with celebration turned into every parent's nightmare. Tanya called 911 to report her daughter missing. She told police that Leon had received a call late that night. A friend's car had supposedly broken down, and he needed help. According to Tanya, Janelle offered to go with Leon, and that was the last time she saw either of them. But her story immediately raised eyebrows. Why would a 16-year-old girl who had school the next morning volunteer to go on a late-night car rescue mission with her stepfather, a man with a violent history? And if they just left, why was there no communication afterward? Search efforts launched almost immediately. Local police, aided by volunteers, began combing the area around their Augusta, Georgia home. Search teams swept through wooded areas, vacant buildings, drainage pipes, anything that could hide a person, or worse, a body. Helicopters flew overhead with heat sensors, scanning the ground for movement or freshly disturbed soil. Search and rescue dogs were brought in, but despite the intensity of the search, there was no trace of Janelle or Leon. Meanwhile, Tanya took to Facebook Live. In a live stream hosted by family friend, Pastor Angela Harden, Tanya appeared grief-stricken. She told viewers she had been battling both lung and brain cancer and begged for help donations, shares, anything to find her missing husband and daughter. It was a public plea, raw and emotional. But behind the scenes, something felt off. Tanya's story kept changing. In some versions, she claimed Leon and Janelle left willingly. In others, she admitted she wasn't sure whether Janelle was safe. These inconsistencies didn't just raise suspicions, they derailed the investigation. Search teams wasted critical time chasing conflicting leads. Investigators began to dig deeper into the weeks and months leading up to Janelle's disappearance. What they found was deeply unsettling, a household dynamic that had slowly become toxic and dangerous, and the person who should have protected Janelle may have played a role in her vanishing. At this point in the story, the questions were piling up. Why did Tanya trust Leon so blindly? Was she truly a victim or something else entirely? After Janelle's sudden disappearance, cracks in Tanya and Leon's story began to spread like wildfire, and neighbors were the first to raise alarm. They had heard it all: loud arguments, yelling matches late into the night. It wasn't the kind of household where peace ever lasted long. But what really stuck with people was something strange they noticed the night Janelle vanished. Neighbors said they saw Leon outside, loading tools into his truck. It was well past midnight, just hours before the teenager was last seen alive. Then came a tip, one that should have changed everything. Someone reached out to Tanya, claiming they saw Janelle just 2 days after she'd left home with Leon. According to the witness, it was around 1:30 a.m. in Clearwater, South Carolina. Janelle was alone carrying a backpack, and when the passerby offered her a ride, she declined, saying she was waiting to meet someone. You'd think Tanya would run straight to the police with this information, but she didn't. She never mentioned the tip to investigators. Instead, more conflicting pieces of the puzzle began surfacing. Witnesses reported seeing Leon days later at a stop-and-shop grocery store in Atlanta over 2 hours from Augusta. Security cameras confirmed it. He was alone. No Janelle. Friends and relatives who were interviewed kept repeating the same troubling pattern. Leon's controlling and aggressive behavior wasn't a secret. People had seen it firsthand. And now, with Janelle missing and Leon popping up hundreds of miles away, things didn't just seem suspicious, they felt sinister. Not long after the Atlanta sighting, the Richmond County Sheriff's Office released a public flyer. Leon Tripp was now officially wanted for kidnapping. Tanya, meanwhile, stayed in the public eye. She went on multiple news programs, begging for her daughter's return. She even appeared on major talk shows like The Michael Baisden Show and The Ricky Smiley Morning Show, turning Janelle's disappearance into a public appeal for help. But the more she spoke, the more people started questioning her. Some began speculating about an inappropriate relationship between Janelle and her stepfather. When confronted with the theory, Tanya lashed out. He married to all this prettiness, and he going to run away with our daughter? Come on now, she said in one interview, brushing it off like the very idea was ridiculous. But despite the media attention, the leads started drying up. Days turned into weeks, weeks dragged into months, and the search for Janelle, this vibrant 16-year-old girl, slowly lost momentum. The case went cold. That's when detectives turned their focus inward, not just at Leon, but at Tanya too. They started digging into timelines, phone records, witness statements, and what they found didn't match the stories they'd been told. The inconsistencies were stacking up. Then came the breakthrough. On May 23, 2017, over a month after Janelle disappeared, investigators finally tracked down Leon Tripp. He was hiding in plain sight at a U-Haul facility in DeKalb County, just outside Atlanta. And he wasn't alone. Tanya was with him, in the passenger seat of the truck. Authorities quickly realized the U-Haul was stuffed with their personal belongings. They weren't just hiding, they were preparing to run, to disappear. But it was too late. The law had caught up to them. Both were taken into custody without a fight. During Leon's interrogation, he put up a wall at first cold, guarded, pretending not to know anything. But the pressure started to crack him open. And what spilled out only made things darker. He admitted that he never went to South Carolina to help a friend with car trouble. Instead, he said he and Janelle drove to Atlanta. Then he claimed he gave her some money and told her to catch a bus back to Augusta. That was his story, but no one believed it. Meanwhile, Tanya's interview with police was just as unsettling. Her answers were vague, often evasive. She said she didn't know where Janelle was, mirroring Leon's version of events. But when investigators showed her hard evidence, phone records, GPS data, and witness statements, her story began to fall apart. Then came the most damning piece of all, text messages. Authorities uncovered chilling exchanges between Leon and Tanya. Messages that hinted at a plan to handle Janelle and to stay on the same page. They weren't just scrambling after the fact. They had been plotting. Even worse, police found that both had been using an app on their phones to try and create fake IDs. Why would they need those? Unless they were planning to vanish for good. Though investigators still lacked concrete evidence to charge them with murder, everything was pointing in that direction. And then nearly a year later came the call that would break the case wide open. On March 8, 2018, a tip came into the sheriff's office. An anonymous caller reported human remains in a shallow grave off Golden Camp Road in Richmond County, not far from where Janelle once lived. The scene was eerie. The property had been abandoned and was in foreclosure, owned by a bank. But there, in a makeshift grave, officers uncovered the remains of a young girl. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. It was Janelle. The autopsy revealed signs of blunt force trauma and possible asphyxiation. Ligature marks around her body suggested she had been restrained. While the exact method of her murder has never been publicly released, one thing was clear: her final moments were filled with violence and terror. Pieces of the rope or material used to tie her were found near the grave. And with that discovery, everything investigators had suspected began to fall into place. On the night of April 17, 2017, Janelle's 16th birthday, she was lured away from home. Leon told her they needed to help someone with car trouble, but that was just a lie to get her alone. He drove her about 20 miles north into the dark woods of Clarks Hill, South Carolina. Somewhere along that road, he pulled over. And then he attacked. He overpowered her, restrained her, and according to forensic evidence, killed her in a brutal, premeditated way. Then, in the aftermath, he called Tanya and she helped. Together, they transported Janelle's lifeless body under the cover of darkness back near their home. They dug a shallow grave and left her there, hidden from the world. It was cold, calculated, and completely devoid of mercy. Authorities later held a press conference to update the public. The sheriff walked everyone through a chilling timeline: how Tanya first reported both her daughter and husband missing, how their white GMC truck was found just days later, and how lie after lie unraveled until the truth was finally exposed. By August 23rd, murder charges were filed against Leon Tripp, and Tanya was charged with concealing the death of her own daughter. What began as a missing persons case had now become something far more horrific: the story of a mother and stepfather who betrayed the one person they were meant to protect. At the time of the initial arrest, Janelle's body still hadn't been found, but investigators had seen and heard enough. They were no longer treating this as a missing persons case, or even a kidnapping. This was now a murder investigation, and they were building it piece by piece, determined to uncover the truth. Then on March 8, 2018, nearly a year after Janelle vanished, there was a breakthrough. A local resident was surveying a property in Richmond County, Georgia. The address, 2211 Golden Camp Road. It was a quiet area, mostly vacant land with a history of foreclosure. As they walked through the yard, they stumbled upon something buried. What they saw looked too much like human remains to ignore. They called it in immediately. The scene was secured that same day. Law enforcement contacted Dr. Alice Gooding, a forensic anthropologist working with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Early the next morning, March 9th, she joined investigators back at the site. Together, they conducted a meticulous forensic excavation of the grave. What they uncovered was devastating. Once the remains were recovered, they were turned over to the local coroner and then sent straight to the GBI crime lab in Atlanta for examination and identification. By March 12th, confirmation came in. The dental records matched. The remains were those of 16-year-old Janelle Carwell. It was the confirmation no one wanted, but everyone had feared. After months of tireless investigation, heartbreaking setbacks, and growing suspicion, the mystery of Janelle's disappearance was finally laid bare, at least in part. This case had gripped the entire community. Janelle wasn't just another missing teen to them. She was their child, their neighbor, their friend. The public's support had been constant and unwavering, and authorities openly credited the community for helping keep pressure on the case. Without that involvement, they admitted, they might not have gotten this far. But even with Janelle's body recovered, this was far from over. As the case moved into prosecution, things began heating up in the courtroom. Tanya Tripp's bond, initially set at $500,000, was raised to an extraordinary $880,400 as the investigation revealed more about her role. As for Leon Tripp, he was denied bond altogether. Neither of them would be walking free anytime soon. Both Leon and Tanya were hit with a slew of serious charges: malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping with bodily injury, and concealing a death. At first, prosecutors aimed high. They were prepared to pursue the death penalty, citing the calculated, cold-blooded nature of the crime. But years later, in 2023, they made a strategic shift. Leon and Tanya were re-indicted. The state decided instead to seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The goal was simple: to bring closure to Janelle's loved ones without dragging the process out any longer than it already had been. In 2024, after repeated court delays and emotional buildup, Tanya and Leon finally stood trial. What unfolded in that courtroom was nothing short of gut-wrenching. Prosecutors laid out the full story, backed by digital evidence, expert testimony, and chilling witness accounts. They highlighted how both Leon and Tanya had acted with chilling precision, carefully covering their tracks while the world searched for a missing girl they knew was never coming home. One of the most shocking revelations came from past witness statements, evidence that Leon and Tanya had tried to solicit someone to kill Janelle as early as 2015, and again on 2 more occasions in 2016. These weren't just spur-of-the-moment decisions. They had allegedly been plotting her death for years. Then came the physical evidence. Forensic specialists testified that DNA strands found on the ligature used in the murder matched Leon Tripp. His DNA was at the scene, wrapped into the very tool used to end Janelle's life. Even more damning were the cell phone records. Experts explained that tower pings placed both Leon and Tanya near the burial site in the critical window shortly after Janelle went missing. And just when it seemed the prosecution had said it all, they dropped the final bombshell. Soil samples taken from Leon's pickup truck, the same truck seen on surveillance during the investigation, matched the soil found at the burial site. It was a microscopic fingerprint tying him directly to the grave where Janelle had been discarded. Despite all this, both Leon and Tanya continued to insist they were innocent. But to the court and to the public, the weight of the evidence told a far different story. As the trial drew to a close, Janelle's community came together to honor the young girl they'd lost far too soon. Vigils were held. Fundraisers were launched to help support her siblings and cover funeral costs. A GoFundMe campaign brought in donations from all across the country, and the church Janelle once attended, where she'd been a beacon of kindness and youth, held a memorial service that drew hundreds. There, family, friends, and strangers united in grief and remembrance. Janelle's story had moved people because she wasn't just a name in a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a bright young girl with her whole life ahead of her, and she deserved justice. And now, finally, she was on the path to getting it. Janelle Carwell was laid to rest just 3 days before what would have been her 17th birthday, inside the great young Zion Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia. Hundreds gathered, not just to mourn a life stolen far too soon, but to remember the bright, compassionate, and driven young girl who had once walked among them. They spoke of her smile, her kindness, her dreams that would never come true. It wasn't just a funeral. It was a cry for justice, a community's aching goodbye, and a promise to never forget. Her family, shattered by grief, has since poured their pain into purpose. They've turned to advocacy, speaking out about the flaws in the system that failed Janelle when she needed protection the most. But the truth is, this tragedy might have been prevented. From the very beginning, warning signs were overlooked. Law enforcement initially labeled Janelle as a runaway, despite clear evidence that something more sinister was at play. That delay cost them time that is often the difference between life and death in missing persons cases. It took nearly a week to begin treating the case with the urgency it deserved. And it wasn't just that. Leon Tripp's pickup truck, the same truck later tied to Janelle's burial site, was found abandoned early in the investigation, halfway between Augusta and Clarks Hill. That clue alone should have raised every red flag, but somehow it didn't. And that oversight may have allowed two people, hiding in plain sight, to cover their tracks and slip further away from accountability. Janelle's case exposes a harsh reality that vulnerable children, especially those from marginalized communities, can be dismissed far too easily. Her death wasn't just a family's tragedy, it was a systemic failure. And it's a reminder of just how much work is still left to be done to protect those who can't always protect themselves. So now we're left asking, how many more lives will be lost before real change is made? How many more children like Janelle will go ignored, unheard, unseen? Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? And what steps should be taken to make sure something like this never happens again? If Janelle's story moved you, if it made you feel something, don't let it end here. Hit that like button so her name continues to be seen. Share this video so her voice can still be heard. And if you haven't already, subscribe to True Crimes by Dominic, because every 2 days we bring you real stories that matter, stories that deserve to be told. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss the truth behind the silence. Because in the end, it's not just about the crime, it's about the voices we refuse to forget. And Janelle Carwell's voice still echoes.